Greetings, brothers and sisters. I got some stuff I want to talk about just in an introduction here from the last video of RFK Jr and his infidelity. It's more about cheating and the mindset of cheaters and some to do with RFK Jr., but it's just leftover things that I think need to be said, especially to a Western audience, an audience that, comes mostly from America and then Canada and Europe and maybe a little bit Australia. I mean, the majority of people here are coming from a Western upbringing, European, American culture and these things. And so when I was talking about RFK Jr., people are going to have flaws and they're going to have one of the things I heard him say was that, he said to his wife when he started to run for president that he had so many skeletons in his closet that it was unthinkable he'd run for president. Of course, now nobody cares about that. It shows you the times that are there because he had been arrested for drug use on his job, things, he's Hunter Biden-like stuff, right? I mean, when he was a lawyer, he was working at a DA, district attorney's office as a lawyer, and he got busted for drug use as a famous person. 3 divorces, previous wife committed suicide, and a diary of his exploits. When someone wrote a comment, why would you keep a diary of your affairs? He had a diary, he had 37 affairs in 1 year, cheating on his wives and all these things. And, admitted drug addict and these things. And, one of the things that was refreshing about him was he's transparent, at least about the drug use part. And so, people can change. People can everyone has to change. You have to give up I was a punky, selfish, narcissistic young person. And I had a spiritual awakening. I did a Sajmark system. And I'm somewhat better, right? I'm better than what I was. But when I started off, I was not a good person. And I don't, know what I am now, but I'm a better person than I was then, right? And you're moving towards in the positive direction, which is important. Everybody should be moving in a positive direction. There's no stagnant, in the spiritual world, you're either going forward, you're going backwards. There's no stagnant position. You're either moving closer to God or you're moving away from God. Not in the religious context, but I mean that in the spiritual one where you're moving internally towards on your soul's path and towards the divinity that resides within you. You're going inside and finding God, and that God is, there to be embraced inside of you. And that's the first step to being really alive. That's the first step to being a real human being. And most people haven't done that, even that first step. They're materially, they're addicted to materialism, and they're not doing anything, even the slightest bit, to find God within, right? Even, in the Christian tradition, Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is within, and that's what's meant by that. And most people aren't even flirting with that or thinking about it, which is sad, but that's why the current state of humanity is what it is. And so with Kennedy, one of my viewers sent me some, stuff about his dad. His dad apparently was involved with Marilyn Monroe as well. And, there was just, immorality in the Kennedy family. And this person had said that Kennedy, was putting firecrackers in something. I can't remember exactly. I read it this morning, but was throwing them at cars and, was like a little hoodlum. He was doing bad pranks, and he did a lot of bad stuff, right? And he could redeem himself like anybody else. And, everyone's got to figure that out for themselves, right? But the problem is he came out and talked about his addiction and how he couldn't beat his addiction on his own. But he had this spiritual awakening, connection to God. And, I liked what he was saying because it resonates with my own experience. The problem is after he had that spiritual awakening, he was still cheating on his wife and these other things, right? And again, he talked about a lust demon, that he had a lust demon. But the one thing he talked about in these videos was his addiction to drugs, and he couldn't beat that. He didn't talk anything about his lust demon. but he's got multiple demons. And there's lots of broken people like this. And I want to discuss this personality configuration and, this, what we call samskara in the Sajmark system. I have information about it that most people don't. And, stuff I haven't really talked about here all that much. So when talking about cheaters and infidelity and, this kind of thing, I'm talking about a very specific thing here. And it's not people who are in a dead marriage or they don't have any sexual relationship with their significant others, and their spouses, like their sexual relationship has died, and they might stay together for the kids or whatever it is, and there's or people who want to get divorced or whatever, the relationship is over, and there's all these kind of things, and those things are their own separate thing, each one of them. What I'm talking about specifically here is people who are happy with their spouse. They have a good spouse. It's usually men, but it could be women. And they feel like they can cheat on their spouse and have this other thing and not affect their marriage and not affect their family. And, they want to have both things. They want to have their marriage and their spouse, but they also want to have sex with other people. And they think they can get away with it and it's not going to cause problems. And there's people who are, in Kennedy's case, where he had 37 affairs in 1 year, all these things, right? Where there is, an addiction there. And, the lies and the gaslighting and the deception that goes with it. And, to engage in something like this, there's lower reasons, selfish reasons not to do it. And I want to get into that again a little bit here. And then there's higher reasons. There's the higher spiritual reason. And so I want to talk about both those things, how this thing is bad for you on an egotistical level and certainly on a soul level. So on an egotistical level, I talked about this a little bit in my old video, that I was around cheaters. And I came up with my own idea, that, which I guess is kind of a higher idea, that, the person that you claim to love the most, if you're cheating on them, then who won't you cheat on, right? If you're cheating on the person that you're most vulnerable to, most connected to, most dependent on, most, in so-called in love with, most, you're partnering with this person and there should be loyalty there. And you're doing something to hurt their heart, which I didn't know back then. Their heart, and this is another thing with Kennedy, he's going after people's hearts. Same thing with Donald Trump. He's trying to win people's hearts. Like, this is what I, in terms of the Sajmark system. There's one way you could just try to impress people on a egotistical level. And, but there's another thing when you try to win people's hearts, when you talk to them in a way that they have a need that you're fulfilling. They need somebody, they need a leader, they need someone who's going to solve this problem of the system collapsing. And they somebody who resonates with them. And Kennedy's done a good job of figuring out the different demographics of people and talking directly to them and winning their hearts, right? Only to later be hurting them because he's a deceiver, right? And so Trump did this, Kennedy did this. These are recent people. Like, Biden isn't winning anybody's heart. Again, he's just not. Kamala Harris isn't winning anybody's heart. Ron DeSantis, these guys. They're not going to win people's hearts. They just don't have the personality for it, the charisma, and the ability to win people over. And I'm talking about different level of support and enthusiasm for Trump and Kennedy, and Bernie Sanders to some extent. And then people are like, well, I got to choose somebody. This guy sounds all right. That's how they feel about these other people. And so Kennedy's winning people's hearts. But in your relationship with your significant other, if that person gives you, their heart, whatever that means, it's an actual process. This has happened in the Sajmark system with the current defunct master, not Sajmark, but the meditation I do with heart, the heartfulness aspect of it. This guy Daji, who's, wants to be a guru and he's just a horrible person and he's just done horrible things, right? He's having a spiritual fall. And when you win somebody's heart, you're responsible for the care of their heart, which is the heart is a delicate thing. People give up life after they have a broken heart. Like, people get broken from a broken heart. To some extent, the hearts of your kids, the hearts of your you have the people in your family or whatever, people give you their heart's invested in you, and then you do something and it hurts that person's heart, right? Of course, I didn't know this back when I made this realization that, if you cheat on your spouse, then who won't you cheat on? You're a cheater. Then there's no one that will ever be able to trust you, and you can't trust yourself. If you do this form of cheating I'm talking about, where you lie to them and you do something outside of the relationship, you want to keep that person, so you lie to them, but you're deceiving them so you can do something else, right? And eventually you're going to get caught, and that's part of this thing. I mean, people are self-destructive, and they're going to figure it out one way or another. They're going to be suspicious of it, and you yourself know, like you know, and you think of yourself as a piece of boop, right? You're just boop. I failed on the boop. I flubbed the landing. But you know yourself, like you feel guilt, right? And so that's the first part. Like you're a piece of boop. And when you do that, it hurts you. When you lie and do things and deceive and do these kind of things, and you're engaged in these things, it wears on you. You don't sleep well. You need to take medication to sleep. All these things, right? And you're constantly going to be worried. And this is something I saw with all my cheating friends. I had two friends that were really bad cheaters. My one friend was my best friend from high school, who moved to Atlanta. His mom, he had lived with his dad in high school in Connecticut, then moved to Atlanta where his mom lived. And, I ended up going down and living there. I was looking for a place to go. One of my friends had family in Atlanta as well. And he was supposed to come with me, but he, chickened out at the last minute. And I went down there, and it was a good experience, and I was around the area where the ashram was. Eventually, I would do Saj Marg, years later. But this guy was living with this red-haired girl who was very fiery, and she, I didn't like her at first, but like we were going somewhere together, and she went in to get something at a convenience store. I was waiting in the car, and she came out. And she left like a sandwich and an orange juice on the sidewalk next to this homeless guy. Like she had a good heart that way. She's kind of, she was kind of fiery, but after that we kind of became friends. And he started cheating on her, and she was like not having it. Like she was, and he cheated on her a couple of times. One time he came into my restaurant, I think, and he actually brought this girl into my restaurant, which sucked because he was living with this girl, and I saw her all the time as the red-haired girl. And she just was psychic. She was like sensitive and figured it out. She went through his wallet and found a phone number. And he was in the shower, and she came in the shower and stuck the phone number in the shower and started yelling at him, right? Like, and so then he started dating. He worked at like Holiday Health, Bally's, whatever it was, one of these athletic clubs. And he started dating a girl there who he eventually married. And he was cheating on this girl, and the girl knew that like I didn't like to lie, so she'd call me up, and it was stressing me out. Like I was stressed. I was probably more stressed than anybody. And I'm like, what way is this to live? Like you live in this thing where you're constantly, waiting for your lies to be discovered, and this could be in anything where you're just living lies, and you live with this Damocles sword hanging over your head, waiting for your lies to be discovered. And that's so many people that live in a deceptive, reality where they're lying to, in this case, your significant other, but, everybody in the community. You're like a drug addict, or you're, whatever you are, like Kennedy and his positions here. Like you're just waiting for people to figure you out, and you're going out and just openly deceiving them and pretending to be something that you're not. And, the truth is going to come out, right? And so it's just no way to live, right? It's just no way to go through life. So anyways, this girl was just constantly calling me, and, she knew what she was cheating on. He was cheating on her, and like he put me in a bad position, and there's this like illusionary bro code, and I'm not supposed to rat out my friend, all these things, right? Just all this ickiness, like all the stress you cause for everybody else. And I had another friend who, well, anyway, so this girl eventually drove over to our apartment. So that I was living in the same apartment. She had moved out, and he was with this new girl, and they came out of our apartment. I was sleeping, and he went to work. I waited a table, so I was like sleeping in or whatever. And when I got up, she was there, the red-haired girl. She was all upset, and she had maced him like on his way to work. And the cops had come, and she had run off, and she came back, and I'm like, you're going to end up in jail. I'm like, just, he's cheated on you. I mean, you have enough information. Like, move on. Like, you don't need to get revenge. Like, just move on. You know that he's a piece of boop. Like, just, he's betrayed you. Why are you still, involved in this, right? Just a weird thing. And so I had another friend who was just a serial cheater. I told a story about him and the dog groomer in my last video. And he was constantly getting, caught in all these things. And he got off on it. And the lying, the manipulating, the gaslighting to these girls, whatever it was. And he got in trouble, like there was things that happened. Like he was, he was a broken person, right? And then there was, my brother, which I've talked about, and like leaving his wife on his son's birthday, and then just all that, and the way that went down, and it fractured his family and his relationship with his kids, and just all of it. And then he told me about like all these affairs he had, and it made more sense to me. I was oblivious to it even in my college years, because I didn't think he would do that. And when I found out, I was like, oh wow, so he was living this double life. And like he just couldn't help himself. Like even later on, and even after he started doing the Sajmar practice, and he started to feel numb from the waist down. Like the system was trying to help him get over his addiction. Like he just stopped. Like he said, he just felt numb. Like he wasn't from doing the Sajmar practice. It was like helping him to get over his like womanizing stuff or whatever. But he still he couldn't do it like on an egotistical level. I mean, he got better and stuff. He got older. But, like I just saw it, and the stress that he put on himself. And like there was a time where he was heading on a train with his youngest son, and he was dating that crazy woman that I talked about in the other video, this crazy blonde woman. And, his marriage was fractured. And there was a single mom, and he started to, be interested on the train. And my brother's telling me the story, and his son's like, basically like, his like 9-10-year-old son's like, no, like we're not doing this. This is supposed to be father-son time. And he said, and he just had to deal with, he said to me, that this wasn't going to be about me. I just had to be there for my son, or just have this, experience that I couldn't, do what I want to do, which was, bang the single mom. He was already, involved with another single mom, just all this stuff. And the complexity and the stress that you deal with. So on a selfish level, it's the guilt of getting caught, right? It's the guilt that you live with of getting caught and destroying people's lives, and, I'm even hurting people's hearts. Like when I was a younger person, not a great person, as punky and selfish, I still felt things. I would say horrible things to people, or we would insult each other. And, sometimes I would, because of being insightful, say something that was much harsher and, worse than what my friends were saying, and I would feel like the hurt that I caused them inside myself, like in my own heart. I didn't know what it was until I started doing Sajmar practice, which is cultivating the heart. And when you hurt somebody's heart, you can feel it in yourself. And, it gives you reason not to do that, because now you feel what they feel. You develop empathy. And it's, something that I wasn't consciously aware of. But as I started doing the Sajmar meditative practice, it was something that was there, right? That was helpful to me. I wasn't good socially, but I could, understand when I hurt somebody's heart. I could feel it in myself, right? And it helped me be a better person, married to somebody who was always offended and was a perpetual victim. And, it helped me be less, brutal in what I said, things that I would say that were harsh or whatever. And, it helped me soften up and, these things. It was actually, a benefit I got out of that, horrible marriage. But there is a series of negative conditions that go along with cheating. The guilt and the shame that you feel, like this cynicism that you have, because then you feel like everyone else is a cheater as well. So you never trust anybody. You lose trust. You don't trust yourself. You don't trust other people. So you can't be in a trusting relationship. The hurt and pain you cause the people around you, that comes back to you. These are all like selfish reasons, or self reasons, egotistical reasons not to cheat, because it's just like there's side effects of being an alcoholic. There's a side effect of being addicted to gambling. And the people who have these conditions, they all suffer these things. And they can list them for you. They can list all the things that are caused, financial ruin if you're addicted to gambling, the negative emotions you feel, the depression when you lose, just all of it. Like you end up being addicted to pills and alcohol as well, to kill the pain. I mean, these things go hand in hand. Things that go along with being an alcoholic, of course, liver damage and physical damage, and you're not being able to sustain employment, destroying your relationships, making a fool of yourself, right? All these things. Failure. I mean, there's just lists of things that go with all these addictions. And with sexual addiction, there's as many or more. And sexual addiction usually crosses the line where you're also a substance abuser, and also, many of these other things, right? The guilt, the shame, and then all the conditions that go with it. And sex addicts can tell you this. And there's so many sex addicts now in the youthful generation because they've been socialized by very graphic pornography since they're very young. And that has shaped their understanding of relationships. That's their training as pornography, right? Their training is, they've been brought up on their, in terms of, they don't look at their parents' good marriage or even dysfunctional marriage as a training ground for marriage. Their training ground is pornography. Like that's what they, understand as being sexual relationships. And so there's so many like people with some level of sexual addiction just because of that. All these people grew up in the age of the internet porn. Internet porn makes up 1/3 of the internet. Like it's just that powerful an influence. And so there's all the things you go through on an egotistical level. And you're not special, you're not different. Everybody goes through these things. But then there's the higher levels for not doing it. And one of the things that Master Chargy said, the third master of the Sajmark system, and I don't know where it is, like I only heard this talk once, or I saw it, or I read it, I'm not sure where it is. I can never, there's stuff in the literature that I would like to come back to and hear or see again. But he had this epic talk to Western people. Like he would come over to America and he'd just be able to make these observations, or Europe, or wherever he was in the world, about the culture and the issues with the culture. He would just like see through it. And he said, that people in your culture are in the state of perpetual choosing. Like there's a choosing period. There's a choice period in any kind of decision. And you make the choice and you live with it. And he was talking a little bit about marriage, but everything else as well. But because of our consumer-based nature, because we've been taught to be consumers and everything's about pleasing the customer, and the customer's always right, and then you're always supposed to be consuming, you're always in a choice point. You're always in, this perpetual state of choosing, that you're constantly being asked to choose something, and you're constantly buying something, purchasing something, making choices about this or that. And, there's no finality to your choices. And that's one of the reasons for the divorce culture in America and the West. Because the idea is you made a choice, but you can always make another one. And then people get married and they're still in the choosing process. We're still always in the choosing process where we're always shopping, we're always looking. The part of the romantic relationship that's most shown is the beginning part, the falling in love part. Falling in love, Master Chargy had another talk where he said you should rise in love. That, falling in love. So this is a long time ago. I think other people have come up with the same idea, but I think he was maybe the original person. But he said you should rise in love. Like falling in love is a stupid way to look at it. Like it's not a fall. Love is the highest. You have to rise up to love. You don't fall into love. But love is like considered something mundane, or like it's, it's some kind of a lower thing. And, people our culture focuses on that initial stage of the relationship, the two people coming together. Like you see sitcoms, and they had that Jump the Shark website, and one of the categories of a show Jumping the Shark was they did it. Like there was some romantic tension, Sam and Diane and the Friends show, whatever that bar show, Everyone Knows Your Name. Don't tell me, don't care, I don't need to know. But you saw this in lots of shows and sitcoms where there'd be sexual tension between two people, and you were waiting for them to get together, and that there was anticipation of that drove the show, especially for women, but everybody. And then once they came together, the show would end because that was a big part of the storyline and the plot line. And marriage and doing the hard things in marriage, and the happily ever after. Like there's this fairy tale storyline in so much of our our stories, our movies, our TV shows, things like this. And the happily ever after part deals with, they don't deal with what happens once you do get married and you have all the sacrifices and the adult level things that you haven't been trained for, right? All the things that you haven't been given, you don't know how to do those things, right? Because you don't have any training. All you've seen is the beginning part. And that's the fun part, the honeymoon period, the romantic part. Then there's a sacrifice. You don't see very many things on mothers and fathers. Good mothers and fathers might be there, but oftentimes the heroes of TV shows and movies are orphans. So you don't even see good families. You don't see the idea of a mother being a protagonist, sacrificing for her family, these things. And the difficulties they go through, that's not really talked about. Like all is the choosing period, obsessed with the choosing period. And then people, go through the choosing period. They have this big, marriage. So women are, young women are fantasizing about their marriages and the wedding day. That's their big day. And then they have the cold hard reality that they don't know what they're doing, haven't been trained properly to be in a family, and they don't have family support, and their own parents are divorced and losers, and this is be the choosing, the constant being in a state of choosing and not taking responsibility for your choices, making a decision and living with it, right? And there's just a lot of stuff, like when you're young you don't think about these things, but you're in this euphoric stage where there's the sexual attraction and the sexual energy, which is a pleasurable energy, and it's like being in a daze, the honeymoon period. But then there's the reality of real adult problems. There's raising kids, which is stressful, and people love kids and talk about kids, but kids are difficult. Like they're little people. They have their own issues, and and even if they're great kids, there's stress to do with that. And then as you go older and you're in your marriage and your situation, there's going to be differences that you have in your philosophies, your view of the world, the direction the family should go, the stress that you're dealing with, the issues, the problems, what you do with, financial issues, money issues, and where you're going towards as a family, as a couple. And you haven't been prepared for any of this stuff. You don't have any support, elders in your family. And so this is where, real life sets in. They talk about these midlife crises, and people want to go back to the fun time because they've been told their whole life it's about enjoyment, the pursuit of happiness, right? And that you're also always choosing, and now you're living with that choice, and it's not a good one. There's stress, marital stress, all the things that happen. And that's why there's all these divorces, right? Because people don't realize what they're up against and what they've committed to, and so they want to choose again, right? They want to have the ability to choose and be in that, initial stage and thinking somehow it's going to be better, and it's not, right? Okay, so I had to go out. My wife and I went to the chiropractor. We've been going weekly since we got into an accident. My neck stiffens up, but I feel a lot better. But anyways, he's kind of a truther, which we've realized with our conversations over the, I've been going there maybe 6 months. My wife maybe a little bit longer. But clearly he doesn't get to talk to people that believe what we believe. And he's been talking about like going to the bus stop with his kids and some of the, horrible thing these suburban moms are saying, like it's totally woke, this liberal, bizarro world, and they have bought in hook, line, and sinker. But the other thing was that, we went to Whole Foods, so we had picked some stuff up on the way home. And I'm making meatball subs, which I haven't for a while. And I made them, and I made rolls for the first time. This is like last week. I'm going to do it again this week. I stopped making them because I tried to make them in the sous vide, but they didn't come out that great. Anyways, so I meant to get Italian parsley, and I want to get organic because it's a lot different in terms of the organic parsley and cilantro. And I got the wrong stuff. I got cilantro and it was conventional because I didn't understand the way they were placing the stuff in the store. And so we were in line and she said, "Is this cilantro?" I said, "No, it's parsley." She said, "No, it's cilantro." So I had to run back. And I was running and I'm like, wow, I'm moving a lot better. I've lost about 6 or 7 pounds. And so I'm like, wow, I'm running like I used to run, like I have more agility. I'm not running like an old fat guy. So that was a breakthrough. But anyways, going back to what I was saying here, I was talking about there's a time for choosing. And then once you make your decision, you live with it. And that's how it should be for marriage and all these other things. Sometimes you get a raw deal. I mean, this is the difference between countries that are considered fatalistic, like India and countries in the Middle East, where they say it's God's will or it's Allah's will or whatever. In America, where you're like, oh, I get to choose out of this, isn't working out the way I thought, right? Things aren't going in the way that you thought they were going to go, and you're not having the fantasy and the dream and the dream that you were promised, this happily ever after you were promised by Disney when you were growing up or whatever. And so, that's my thought about all this stuff. And then, one more thing about this, the stuff with Kennedy particularly, but, this is with people who are serial cheaters. Him keeping this diary, which I, alluded to earlier. One of my commenters said, "Why would you keep a diary and then rate the experience and all these things?" And then the diary gets in the hand of the ex-wife and makes it into the New York Post that does a hit piece on him. And then he runs for president, right? Like, I guess what he said to his current wife is that he has so many skeletons in his closet. If they could all vote, he would be king of the world, right? So that's, he's got more things that we don't know about, but there's this self-destructive nature for people who are cheaters. Like, anybody who's doing things that are unhealthy and unnatural and are deceptive and manipulative, and I talk about this with the controllers all the time, it's like they want to get caught. Some part of them wants to get caught. Like, your soul will make you feel guilty and make you feel, will undermine your confidence in what you're doing. And the more you have some sort of spiritual connection, your connection to your soul, the more you have some humanity left in you. But even the people who don't, there is a soul there, and your soul wants you to stop piling up to samskaras. I talked about samskaras in the, Journey series so much. And these are the impressions you take with you from life to life, and things that are, they're things that either out of guilt or shame or, addiction or whatever it is, they are the things that bring you back into life, and your soul is hoping your ego will get it right this time. They give it a second chance, a third chance, 100th chance, that you'll throw off your addictions, you'll throw off your negative tendencies, that you'll get desensitized to alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be. And you'll rise up and do a better job. I mean, that's what, their hope is, right? That's what they think is going to happen, or the plan is, and that's the design here, that you would come into life, and each life you would grow a little bit, get closer to God. You would realize that fame and fortune, these things aren't why you're here. You discover your true purpose. You get on your spiritual path. You fumble around for a life or two. You come back in, you get serious about it. And then finally you come in and you don't care at all about what's going on in the material world. You don't care about anything that's, part of the illusion. And you just get down to business, and you execute your life the way your soul wants you to execute it. And, the cleaning process in the Sage Mark system, which I've talked about, is phenomenal for that, right? I wrote a paper called The 13th Step, based in the 12-step program. I took addictions, and this is for my master's level, my master's degree in counseling. And in one of the classes, I wrote about the 13th step. It might have been the addictions class. And, there's 12-step programs, which, to my understanding, there is some success that people have from them. We had to attend some meetings, observe some meetings, and, I had a good professor in that class. And there's this Al-Anon, and, I went to go to that, and my classmates were like, "Oh, you've never gone to one of those?" I'm like, "No." They're like, "Oh boy." And it was all women, and I was there just observing, which put me in an uncomfortable position, and I was really uncomfortable as it was. Like, it was not an environment I was supposed to be in. And these women were all bitching about their families and their husbands, and they were people who are connected to alcoholics, and they all had sob stories, and they're all supposed to be supportive. And a couple of times I was cracked up because that's what I would do. And if I did, I would have to leave. I mean, I would have to fail the class because I had to just suck it up. But, I guess there's some success in these programs. But there is a step beyond that, which I called becoming a spiritual person. The 13th step is connecting to God. And, of course, the cleaning process. The people in the 12-step programs are constantly saying that they're an addict and they'll be an addict for the rest of their life. And this was Kennedy's position. But the cleaning process in the Sajmark system, if you are willing to go through it, and it's not easy, it's not like you're making effort, you're suffering through the cleaning, the what they call boga, the experience of the samskara, the impression, in this case addiction. And, I went through this cleaning. I had this past life where I had a resentment and bitterness towards God. And it took 3 months, really. It took years and years to build up, and then 3 months of intense, just a nightmare, what was going on in my life at the time, the divorce and things. And it took a lot to extract that from my system, but when it was gone, I felt so much better and lighter. I talked about this extensively in my Journey series videos. And, someone with an addiction can get that cleaned off. They have to want it, they have to, even after it's cleaned off, they have to refrain from the memory and the desire to drink or participate in any sort of substance abuse. But on a spiritual level, it can be cleaned off. And that's, the 13th step. And years ago with my, my first family, my ex had an old friend from college or something who came down with her family. And she was married to a kind of an effeminate man. He's a nice guy, but, they're kind of liberal, I guess. And she had suffered pretty horrible abuse, and also was a substance abuser. And she was in the 12th step. And my ex, brought up my paper, and she kind of got a little bit triggered by the idea that there'd be a 13th step. And my ex said, "Why don't you counsel her?" And we went into one of the rooms in our house, and not what I wanted to do, because I was never good at counseling. I'm not a good people person. And the woman was hyper defensive about she was really connected to her 12-step program and didn't want to think about taking the next step towards being a spiritual person. And she had 3 kids, and the kids seemed pretty cool, a little bit older than my kids. And then a year or two later, she left her husband. And I guess the reason was that she told my ex that she wanted to sleep with men that weren't her husband. She was, a sex addict as well as a regular addict. And then she, destroyed her family, and, she never got over her addictions. In all these things, there's an element of self-sabotage and self-hatred and self-loathing. And Kennedy has that because of what it was said about his diary, where he's condemning himself, and he's viewing himself through the eyes of his Catholic upbringing, and, the tragic and addictive nature of his family, and the tragedies and the crises and all these things that went with it, right? And somebody like that is, they're going to blow, right? Somebody like that who's, you're better off having a criminal who's doesn't have a guilty conscience than, somebody who does, right? people who are, unhappy, or they hate themselves for selling out or doing whatever they're doing. People with those type of personalities are, eventually it's going to have to be reconciled. And usually that reconciliation comes with the person imploding in one way or another in scandal and just having a breakdown, physical and mental, emotional, and these things. And, that's what you're looking at with Kennedy. Like I think he is sincere in some ways, but he's damaged goods. There's so many broken people out there. And, most of those broken people hate themselves and, blame themselves on some level for whatever was done to them. And there's a lack of strength, inner strength in their system to become natural and healthy people and get on a spiritual path and be functional. And so they're just headed towards like some sort of guilt-driven punishment or comeuppance that they've been creating throughout their experience. All these people who run the system, the controllers, many of them on their deathbed beg God for forgiveness, and, they want to sort of, they're freaked out about dying after doing damage to the whole planet and hurting other people and keeping this dysfunctional system going. And so those people are always a nightmare because they're just a ticking time bomb of some self-destructive crisis, and they take people down with them. It's not like they just go off and their destruction hurts them. It hits everybody, right? You see that with Trump now and all the stuff he's dealing with because of his oppositional nature and the stuff that he, went on the attack, and now they're all coming after him with these court things and all the rest of it, right? And then all of us suffer because of the division and the disharmony in our country. And so, those are just my hopefully final thoughts about this Kennedy thing and the rest of it. Let's move on to some more stuff here. Okay, so I just have time to cover Trump's most recent indictment, which seems like a non-story, like his fourth indictment. Put him in jail or not, but how many indictments, what's going on? It's like they're keeping Trump alive. This helps Trump in his base. It helps him seal up the Republican nomination. He's squished the competition already, and, whatever's going on there. And so I turned on CNN, and unfortunately I should have taped it with my phone because they said the word conspiracy 10 times in 2 minutes in the morning show. Caitlin Collins has taken Don Lemon's time slot, which is hilarious, and I'm going to cover that in a separate video. I've been waiting to do that for a while because it's so funny. But she has a new show, and I want to give that the kind of attention that it deserves. But Don Lemon is out, has been out, and this is his primetime slot. She's now in primetime. After that disastrous town hall where all the liberals were hating on her for not asking Trump the tough questions. But her and somber tie Jake Tapper, droopy dog Jake Tapper, they start talking about the conspiracies here.
There was no suggestion in the federal indictment of Donald Trump and 6 unnamed co-conspirators, 4 of whom at least are in this indictment as well and named. That's Giuliani, Eastman, Chesebro, and Clark. But Mark Short, Vice President Pence's chief of staff, told me that Mark Meadows, Trump's chief of staff at the White House, was the ringleader of the whole conspiracy. And he suspected that because Meadows was not a co-conspirator in the federal indictment, that he was cooperating. So it is interesting indeed that Mark Meadows is indicted in this state indictment.
Yeah, and he was the one who, with Georgia in particular, Jake, he was the one who went down. He was.
So they've already said conspiracy multiple times. And in the actual legal document, it talks about when they read from the indictment, it uses the word conspiracy over and over again, that they conspired to overthrow the 2020 election. And all of a sudden, they believe in conspiracy theories, right? They demonize all of us who talk about conspiracy theories, but here they are talking about a conspiracy theory. They believe in this one, that Trump and his dopes over there committed a conspiracy to, came together and plotted a conspiracy to, conspired to overthrow the 2020 election. And it's just ridiculous, right? Like,
we believe the reporting is that Fani Willis wants to go after conspiracy charges, racketeering charges, not just for Trump, but for his allies as well, essentially tying them together, these so-called RICO cases, right, which I'm sure you're...
So this was before, but she talked about racketeering and conspiracy, right? And then they're using the conspiracy over and over again.
You're very familiar with.
So conspiracies are real. There are real conspiracies. And if you're a conspiracy theorist like these people, well, you know, you might not be crazy. I don't know about these people. But the rest of us.
How does this fit into that? And what will make that unique about how she's putting this case together?
Under the Georgia RICO statute, which is really conspiracy plus, it allows you to bring in related criminal actions into one sort of overarching conspiracy theory. It lets the
So you're a conspiracy theorist.
Jury hear a story. On day one, this is what happened, all the way through the conclusion of the story. And these disparate acts by all these different actors woven together in this RICO conspiracy charge allows for that storytelling, and that's what you want as a prosecutor. You always say, as a prosecutor...
So again, they've been talking about conspiracy. They've been using the word over and over again. It's their talking point. They used it in the morning. This girl was on the morning show a day later, and I'm not going to find that. I can just, and she and her cohorts just said conspiracy, conspiracy, conspiracy theory, conspiracy, conspiring, right? They said it over and over again. And that's their talking point, that this was a conspiracy. And yet they've been talking about how crazy conspiracy theorists are. And again, this is just a theory. No one's been convicted of anything yet, but they've embraced the conspiracy because this one's okay. This one's a real one. So this is MSNBC.
Yeah, we've known for a while that Coffee County was under the microscope. What happened down there? It's a rural Georgia county, very deeply conservative. Trump.
Remember her, the Kraken lady?
Country down there was not a very close election, but we know that a team of...
She has so much evidence, it's coming out of her. Remember?
Trump supporters and data analysts they had hired entered the Coffee County Elections Board meeting, spent hours in there copying voting data. Their entrance was caught on security surveillance. That data was distributed to conspiracy theorists in the county, pro-Trump conspiracy theorists. So we know that's under
Those are all conspiracy theorists.
The microscope. We're not, of course, sure if that will be involved in the indictment, but we know that Fani Willis and her investigators, her team of investigators, have been closely looking at what happened in Coffee County.
So Trump and his people were believing in a conspiracy theory that the good Democratic Party and the honorable, non-lying, non-plagiarizing, non-groping, non-sniffing, non-snoozling Joe Biden and his team of Democratic, moral and ethical people, and the media, which is morally unethical in all of it, would not conspire to overthrow an election. They wouldn't do such a thing. They would never do that. So those are conspiracy theories. You're crazy to believe an American election could there be cheating. Americans don't cheat. Americans never cheat. Lance Armstrong wasn't on steroids. A number of other baseball players and famous people, athletes, weren't on steroids. There's never been a cheating in an election. There's never any lying and stealing. There's never any bribery. There's never politicians' sons smoking crack and getting FaceTime with their fathers as foreign companies support his crack habit. These are just good, solid folk, and there's no conspiracies here. And they never tried to cover up Hunter Biden's story, his laptop story, for 11 months before the election, which would have torpedoed Joe Biden's chance of winning. It never would have happened. They wouldn't do something like that. That's a crazy conspiracy theory. But there is a real conspiracy here, and it's Donald Trump.
When I asked one of our other legal analysts, Lisa Rubin, what this indictment might look like, they described it as chapters, that instead of laying out one linear big narrative, they're going to take this piece by piece. I wonder, when you look at these text messages in this separate lawsuit, if you have any sense of where they might factor in those indictment chapters.
You're talking about the text messages themselves. Yep. I think the Coffee County narrative is, as your other legal guest explained to you, sort of part of a number of overlapping conspiracies. We used to think of
overlapping conspiracies. So this guy talked about conspiracy theories that stupid Trumpers have that aren't true. But these are, at least Rubin that is talking about overlapping conspiracies that are true. So you got to get your conspiracies straight. The ones that Democrats and the media say are real ones are the real ones. And the rest of them aren't. You got to understand your conspiracies here.
About what happened after the 2020 election as successive stories. And we know now through the federal indictment, through the January 6th committee hearings and other evidence that actually there were a number of sort of overlapping conspiracies that meet in sort of one big Venn diagram. I expect that that's how the Georgia indictment will look. There were a number of people.
And it did look. She uses the word conspiracy and conspirers and co-conspirators over and over again in the indictment. And so that's that, right? That's the hypocrisy. But there's one more piece to this, and that's the gloating. The gloating. Remember how miserable this dude was when Donald J. Trump was elected and she started to cry. And now they get to, I mean, this much star power on one show. Rachel Maddow and Hilary J. Clinton, these dudes, I mean, they're just...
all over the country right now, people are wondering what Hillary Rodham Clinton is thinking watching things unfold in Georgia. She is the former Democratic presidential nominee.
Or they wonder what she smells like.
A U.S. Senator from New York and Secretary of State. I should tell you she has
And the answer is not good.
a new essay out in The Atlantic on the well-being of Americans and our democracy. It's called The Weaponization of Loneliness. Madam Secretary, fancy meeting you here.
I
It's really
can't
nice to have you
believe
here.
this.
Yeah, this is not the circumstances in which I expected to be talking to you.
Nor me, Rachel. It's always good to talk to you, but honestly, I
Tug your ear.
didn't think that it would be under these circumstances. Yet another set of indictments.
This is something, this is becoming like a skill set. Like in the
Yeah.
news business, you say like, oh, I've covered Olympics or
Yeah.
I've covered a campaign. Now it's, those of us who've covered 4 indictments. I don't know if 4 is it. We don't know if Donald Trump is among those indicted this evening, but all expectations are that he will be. Do you feel satisfaction in that? You warned the country essentially that he was going to try to end democracy, but most of the country...
Exactly. She warned. She's always been right. She's always been spot on. She's always been likable. I mean, why isn't she president? Like, things would be so much better had she beat Donald J. Trump, because she's just an excellent person, one of the best people. She's not murderous or hateful or unlikable. She's not a witch.
The country didn't believe you.
Well, it's hard to believe. I don't feel any satisfaction. I feel great, just great, profound sadness that we have.
She's great, profound sadness. I feel great, profound sadness.
Have a former president who has been indicted.
A former president who's been indicted. My great, profound sadness is at the hands of his indictment.
For so many charges that went right to the heart.
They went right to the heart of the...
whether or not our democracy would survive.
Whether our democracy would save the soul of America.
We don't know yet what the charges coming out of Georgia are, but if you stop and think about what the public evidence is, and you've been talking about some of that for the last hour, he set out to defraud
the American people and the American government.
United States of America.
United States of America.
And the citizens of our nation.
And the citizens of our nation. And me, particularly when I actually won. When he said he actually won and the Russians didn't fix the election for him, well, they did fix it for him when it was against me. But when Joe Biden won, he won legitimately.
He used tactics of harassment, intimidation. He made threats. He and his allies went after state officials, local officials responsible for conducting elections. Now we know they even went into voting machines.
They went into voting machines. Those voting machines can't be hacked unless it's by the Republicans.
In order to, determine whether or not those voting machines had somehow been breached when they were the ones actually doing the breaching.
Exactly. They're the ones, they're better at software. Remember when my emails got hacked? We're not good at software. The DNC got hacked. Podesta got hacked. I got hacked. We all got hacked. But they're the hackers and we're the hackies.
So there is a great deal already in the public record. We'll wait to see what the indictments themselves say.
It's going to say there are a lot of conspiracies going on and co-conspirers.
Because clearly this investigation has been very thorough. But I don't know that anybody should be satisfied. This is a terrible moment for our country to have.
It's just so terrible. It's the worst moment ever. You know, it wasn't so bad when Barack Obama and then Joe Biden was droning kids. That was okay. When I was the Secretary of State under Obama and we were droning kids over in the Middle East and other places and silencing whistleblowers, that was okay. But in terms of what's going on now, it's much worse.
A former president accused of these terribly important crimes.
They're very important crimes. I got minor crimes. My crimes weren't as important, and you know, my emails and things like this. But his crimes are important ones. He's an important man with important crimes.
The only satisfaction may be that the system is working, that all of the efforts by Donald Trump, his allies, and his enablers to try to silence the truth, to try to undermine.
I'm the big truther. We tell the truth here. He tries to silence the truth, but I always speak truth. He's all fake news.
Democracy have been brought into the light. And,
you know, I know about light because whenever I enter a room, I extinguish it. You know, whenever light's there, and light and me can't coexist.
Justice is being pursued.
This is who we are. Okay. All right, on that note, only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely reporting for the Apocalypse and the Ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.